Well. Thank you. Thank you for that great welcome. Well, it's Tuesday morning. I'm a first-time speaker at DevOps Days, and I'm in a dinosaur dress, so killing it. So I get to talk to you all about security today. My name is Yolonda Smith. I am very lucky and privileged that I work for Target, and I'm specifically in the security group there. What I do with Target is I work with developers and I work with product owners to help them secure their web and mobile applications. That's a really highfalutin $5 way of saying I'm a security consultant. Okay. And I work for the basically an internal security consultancy, right? So I hear a lot in talking with those groups. Bridget's telling me to move forward. I hear a lot in talking with those groups, a lot of the same stories over and over, and I want to see if this story resonates with you as well. If we can, there we go. So actually, don't stop me if you heard this one before, because it'll throw off my time. So hopefully this diagram looks familiar to most of the people in this room today. So what we would typically see is that developer would push some code, it'd have a PR, the PR gets pulled, it goes into the build system, it goes through and passes all its functional tests, its integrated tests, its system tests, because I know you're all doing those, and then somewhere along the way, here comes NetCop, all right? Here comes the security police, making sure that that we're fixing our cross-site scripting and that we're making sure that that no one can actually click on things and make things work anymore, right? I get it. I've heard it. I know it. I've probably said it. All things said. So NetCop comes in and says, "Oh, hey, you gotta stop. We found something on the system. We found something in your application, in your service, in your API. Maybe you're running methods in a way that aren't secure. Maybe you're passing around data in a way that doesn't make sense. But all in all, what could ultimately happen is that a hacker's going to come in. They're going to break into your house. They're going to flip over all your tables, steal all the food out of your fridge, and they're going to punch your dog in the face, and they're going to leave." That's what I call the Oogie Boogie dance, right? It's where we have to come in and make shit up in order to get you to do stuff, right? So what ends up happening in that situation is that the developer comes in and says, okay, I will fix this one thing, whatever it takes, I gotta get this through, it's gotta go to prod, I've got OKRs, I've got a backlog, I've gotta burn through this. So what happens is we put a little tiny patch on that one piece of code, in that one little service, in that one little API, and then it goes back through the system, back through build and test, and we don't hear about it again, right? Or the flip side of the coin is that security decides, you know what, you guys are a little too silly to handle this. All right, so we're going to build our own tools, and we're going to build our own metrics, and our own observability pipeline, and our own monitoring services. And then we're going to inject all of those throughout the pipeline and throughout each phase of the process. And maybe it works for you, maybe it doesn't, but in order to use these things, you're going to have to contort your system, your service, your application, your API, whatever it is that you're building, in order to make this security weird thing work, right? To that I say, hopefully you haven't dealt with this, or maybe you have. I think this certainly sounds familiar to me. All right? The result of all of that is that you end up with a much slower process. You end up having this sort of defensive barrier and this defensive block up against security because they're stopping things from moving forward, right? Well, if you haven't heard it, turns out that most of your peers have, because something like 60% of IT operations and engineering personalities have come back and said that their organizations tend to focus on rapid response to security, to incidents at least. Why? Because we can't get in front of this thing. We're just going to deal with patching it as it comes. But I have some news for you. That strategy, that solution, that approach to solving security issues only actually catches about 30% of all existing security issues that are out there, all right? So you're pushing to production with something like 30% of known issues that are out there. But I really want to focus on this bottom graphic here, which talks about our organization's approach to dealing with threats is reactive, focusing on the immediate threat or hack du jour, right? That's where the Oogie Boogie dance comes into play. That's where somebody heard about Kubernetes that has that's running at the highest level of access. It's running at root. Now we have to go through. Are we running Drupal? Oh my God, we've got Drupal. Let's go off and do this fire drill. See if everyone's got Drupal. Oh my God, it's not patched. Take it all down. And now we've all got this sort of communications breakdown. But is that really an effective method? I would argue no. And in fact, I would argue let's look at the data. Let's look at what has already happened. And let's do a real quick threat model and talk about what's the most likely scenario for most of the people in this room. For those that don't know, a threat model is really just a quick way, well, maybe not so quick, it's a way to understand who and what might be coming at your organization, right? And the vectors that they might take. Where are your vulnerabilities that you know about, right? So chances are, there's a 50-50 shot that hacking will be the primary attack tactic, right? 50-50 shot. That means that it could come through social means. That means it could come through errors or misconfigurations. It means it could come through any number of methods. But there's a 50-50 shot that hacking is going to be the way that someone gets in. That means someone's going to take a hammer to your application and do something bad to it, right? In those cases where hacking is the primary tactic, 60% of those breaches will actually involve stolen credentials. I'm not going to bring up Capital One. Don't ask me about Capital One. But wink, wink, nudge, nudge, guess what I'm thinking about. So 60% of those will involve stolen credentials, meaning that some other breach happened, and then we're going to take those credentials, and we're going to try and use them against your application because users tend to repeat things that they know and that are easy for them to remember, right? There's an almost 70% chance that that breach is going to be perpetrated by someone from the outside of your organization, right? Insider threat is a real thing. Insider threat actually happens, all right? Misconfigurations are a key contributor to insider threats, but for the most part, we're going to expect to see our issues coming from outside. So it's going to affect your production environments. And then finally, after all that, why are they doing it? They're doing it for the money. That's what it's about. It's typically about the money. Unless there's anyone in here from the government of St. Paul or from the state of Minnesota's office, you're worried about someone coming after your money. I see one person back there that's, that's from the government. If you're from the government, chances are it's probably going to be like ransomware or even maybe a nation state. But that's a really sort of odd corner case. So I have all these big scary numbers up, not to scare you, not to put on my own version of the Oogie Boogie dance. So what am I really saying here? I'm saying that nothing matters. That's not what I'm saying. And if you thought that's what I was going to come up here and say, don't worry about security, psych, psyched you all out. What I am saying is that more security is not necessarily more secure, right? We have to figure out a way to put the right controls in the right place that allow us to go fast, that allow us to do what we need to do to deliver our features, to have resilient systems, to actually provide value to our customers and to the people that use our services without having to just pile on all this useless stuff that may not matter. So it's important to understand where those perspectives actually come from. Where are those personas and who are the groups involved in forming the idea that you have to do all the security things in order for you to be secure? I would argue that there's three groups that we want to talk about. First group we want to talk about is engineering. Some of the folks in this room, some of you are operators, some of you are engineering operators. But what I hear most often from the engineers that I work with is that the guidance that they get from security is way out of date. It's not applicable to their tech stack. It doesn't necessarily convert or make sense for what they're trying to do. And the design that they would have to do in order to actually make the security advice work means that they would have to completely contort their entire posture in order to facilitate that change. A lot of times the tooling that we introduce from a security perspective, it ultimately ends up impacting product performance, and it ends up impacting our ability to deliver that customer experience, right? Because now we're sort of contorting ourselves to make it work. And then, for as much as I love doing the Oogie Boogie dance, I will tell you that engineers have gotten really good at calling me on my shit. Right? They are really skeptical for the most part about whether or not this threat is applicable. And does it make sense for them to fix this thing at this time in this place, right? Are we talking about a nation state and it's coming up in a penetration test? Why are we actually spending time on that, right? Well, the other group that I think we need to address is product, the business. The folks that are saying, hey, we want to provide this service, we want to provide this feature, we want to provide this experience, right? A lot of times what I hear from those folks is that security is way too late in feature planning. And because it's not necessarily considered part of the feature planning process, it ends up being pushed off onto engineering as technical debt. It ends up being pushed off in engineering as part of the cost of doing business, right? Because we can't necessarily quickly and easily measure the impact on revenue, the impact on customer acquisition, and on feature adoption. It ends up being an engineering problem to solve, and so product doesn't necessarily want to get involved with security. And then for my part, what I actually hear a lot and what I actually tend to feel when I'm in this scenario is that I'm not necessarily invited to participate. Security ends up being late to the table, and if they're at the table, they're sort of regarded with suspicion. If anyone here has read the State of DevOps report from last year, they're still doing a survey for this year, but the State of DevOps report from last year calls for security to actually get involved in stages 4 and 5 of the DevOps cycle, the maturity model, right? I think that's way too late. I think we should be working to pull security forward into stages 1 and 2 as we're starting to build out our pipeline and our build system. Because security ends up being involved way too late, it ends up feeling really reactive, right? It ends up feeling like, oh, well, we have to fix everything because we caught this one thing, right? And because of that, because we're only finding out things after the product's already built and you have to go to prod, or we're finding out things at the end of the development cycle, every single thing that we do find ends up being sort of a canary in a coal mine. It ends up being a situation where I feel like this one thing is indicative of a whole host of other problems. I will tell you, my personal take is if I see a product or a service that doesn't do session management right, I will dig in and dig in and dig in, because session management for me is that red flag where I say, if we can't get this right, we're missing other stuff, right? So there's a lot of different perspectives on security. I think that everyone collectively recognizes that security is important. So we have to come to some level of common ground, right? And I think to do that, we first have to recognize, understand, acknowledge the fact that security rots. The thing that you deploy on day 1 will be less secure on day 10, less secure on day 50, less secure on day 365. It rots. Why? Because it's exposed to the rest of the world, and the rest of the world has an opportunity to hammer on it and to try and break it. It will rot. I used to tell people security rots like milk, but it's more like security has a decay rate. The next thing we have to acknowledge and recognize is that security is a spectrum. It is not a binary, are you secure, are you not secure? It depends upon who you ask, it depends upon when you ask, it depends upon the actual situation that's involved, right? Who's affected by a security issue. Finally, we have to recognize that security doesn't exist outside the product. Anyone who has spent any time with me at Target knows that I am inherently suspicious of dashboards and metrics that are sort of feeders unto themselves. I call it security people doing security things to do other security things, right? If it doesn't support or serve the product, there's no security there. There's no security to talk about. Okay, so if we can all nod our heads up and down and recognize that, yes, those are the things that we all agree to when we talk about what do we have to understand about security. Now I think we can move forward and say, how do we know how much is enough? So I've got a couple of pillars that I'd like you to consider. Because I think rather than moving to having a situation where we say it's either all or nothing, or it's something where you have to do whatever security says you want, I think it's a partnership involving your customers and your business and how you construct and operate your pipeline, right? That's how you right-size your security. So these are not novel. I mean, I'm not going to win a Nobel Prize for coming up with protect the customer, protect the business, and protect the pipeline, right? These are fairly straightforward things. And when I talk through them, you're going to be like, Yolanda, this seems pretty lame. Like, maybe not lame. You're going to be like, Yolanda, this seems pretty straightforward. Why is it that this is so important? It's important because ultimately, we're still seeing S3 buckets sitting out there with customer data. We're still seeing GCS buckets that are sitting out there with customer data. We're still seeing Kubernetes out there that have root enabled and that allow you to actually move from container to container unmitigated. I think the very first thing, the very first pillar, the number one thing that any one of us can do in this room and we walk away with is to figure out how we better protect our customers. How do we move from talking about security to moving towards something that talks about safety and trustworthiness? Ultimately, that's what your customers are providing to you. They're handing you money, and they're going to hand you their data, and they're trusting you to do the right thing with it. They're trusting all of us to do the right thing with it. And I'm not sitting up here wanting to browbeat you, but we have to question ourselves at every single turn as to what that really means. What does it mean to protect our customer? It means we're not going to embarrass them. It means we're not going to inconvenience them. And it means that we're not going to harm them. I will tell you, as a victim of stalking myself, the thing that scares the crap out of me is location data and the proliferation of location data. How in the heck are we making sure that we are doing the right thing with that data? When I talk about things like inconveniencing them, if a breach comes up, what are we going to do to make sure that they aren't having to sit on the phone for up to 24 hours, take time off of work, spend their own money trying to recover their credit, trying to recover their identity? That's ours to own. That's our burden to bear. And then we have to understand how we measure that trust, and then how do we know when we lose it? Does that loss in trust come from a lack of adoption? All right, does that come from a lack in sales? Does that come from a drop in people wanting to say good things about our brand? That trust is immeasurable, and yet it's so important. So practically, what questions do we need to be able to answer? And I'm going to focus on data here, because this is what the customer is giving us. This is the part of the contract that they're providing, right? What data do we need to have in order to deliver an experience? Ultimately, does this data already exist someplace else? I'll tell you, the more places data exists, the more places you have to protect it, the more places you have to watch it. How long do we want to keep this around? How long do we want to keep this data, right? And who ultimately gets to have access to that data? Do we understand the effects of inadvertent exposure of that data? And then finally, how are we measuring if and when this exposure actually occurs? Next thing we want to do is protect the business. Most of us here work for companies. Companies want to make money and generate revenue. I'm a big believer that if we want to pull security into the planning phases, we have to be thinking about it from the start of the business. We have to think about it from the start of the feature, the start of the requirement, the start of the actual request. Right? So strategically, what does that actually look like? It means we go from gaining and maintaining the customer's trust in protecting our customer to now expanding upon that trust to grow the revenue stream. It's doable. Security doesn't just have to be a cost center, right? But we need to be very methodical and deliberate in understanding what things we will do and what things we won't do. And I love that Liz brought up the idea of documentation in her discussion, because we need to document those things as part of the roadmap, as part of whatever it is we're going to say that we're going to do. We're going to do this. This is how we're going to secure the customer. This is how we're going to make sure this data is good to go. And oh, by the way, we need to make sure that we're planning for the lifetime of that feature. Security is a lifetime obligation. Remember I said that security rots, right? So as part of the product planning phase, there needs to be something in there that talks about end of life. There needs to be something in there that talks about how we ultimately are going to continuously care and feed for this feature, and security is part of that care and feeding. As I stated, security doesn't necessarily have to be a cost center. It can ultimately provide a distinctive competitive advantage. But we need to understand how we measure that advantage over time. And then from that point, once we get those things together, then we need to talk about what I suspect that most of the people in this room here care about, is protecting that pipeline. When we talk about protecting the pipeline, it's important to recognize who's a part of the pipeline. So how many straight-up developers do I have in the room? Raise your hand, please. Straight-up developers. How many operators do I have in the room? How many product types do I have in the room? Architects. How many support staff do I have in the room? How many security folks do I have in the room? Okay, great. There's a whole host. Any CEOs, CFOs, C-level folks? Okay. It's important to recognize that it's not just the infrastructure. It's not just the gear. It's not just the technology that's part of the pipeline. Ultimately, it's your ephemeral environments. Yes, it's your containers. Yes, it's your laptops and your operating systems. Everything that is part of actually touching and building the product, including your supply chain. That's an important note. Including your supply chain. Those are all part of the pipeline, including the people in this room, right? The question that I always ask is, how much do we actually need? How many people actually have to touch this in order to deliver this experience? Because the closer you are to that product, the closer you are to delivering on that experience, the more protections that we're going to ask for you to adopt, right? And then the question becomes, what really motivates those pipeline decisions? When I talk to the folks that I work with, a lot of times is, what's easy? What's the easiest thing? The easiest thing for me to do is to put this data in a GCS bucket and float it out, and then that way anyone can get access to it. That's the easiest thing for me to do. It's not the right thing for us to do, ultimately. And we have to be able to continuously measure how we're pushing that data, how we are managing that pipeline, and then understanding the integrity of the pipeline itself, because that's part of what makes you secure. You'll notice here in this slide that I talked about, that I pulled up the Reddit hack from 2 years ago. They called out the fact that they got hacked because of a woefully insecure, woefully according to Wired, woefully insecure two-factor authentication setup. Essentially, they were using their phone numbers, SMS, in order to provide a secondary means of saying that secondary means of identification. Now, in my security brain, I'm like, haha, they suck, right? But on the same token, I'm like, flip side of that coin, but that's what was available to them, and that's what was easiest. So, understanding that's what was easiest for them at the time, what steps can we take to make sure that we are protecting and providing those same easy solutions and those same easy alternatives without necessarily hurting the pipeline itself? Okay. So when it comes to tactics, when we talk about how are we going to actually go about protecting the pipeline, I already stated, if you're part of the product development process, you're part of the pipeline. That includes the people. And that includes the process as well. The closer you are to the product, the closer you are to raw product, the more protections that I expect you to have. Guess what? And you might not like what I have to say, flip a table, flip a chair. The closer you are to that raw product, I do expect you to have two-factor authentication turned on. I do expect you to have full disk encryption turned on. I do expect you to use a VPN when you're in a public space. I expect that. I need that. We all need that because you are part of what an attacker is going to go after. Right? The other piece of this, and this really comes back down to the technology itself, is that it is possible, and we should make it a point to continuously inspect and interrogate for security issues at each stage of the build process. Look for secrets at stage 1, look for secrets at stage 10, look for API keys at stage 1, look for API keys at stage 15. We have to keep looking for it because there's opportunities at each and every one of those stages for us to actually infect that pipeline. I like to think of the pipeline as kind of a clean room. Our objective is to maintain the sterility of that clean room from end to end. And we can do that if we're constantly checking again and again and again. And then finally, it's important that as we're seeing these little blips on the radar, that we recirculate those blips back into our ops process, back into our observability pipeline, back into a situation where we can go back and say, hey, it seems like we're seeing secrets show up over and over and over again. How is it that we can make sure that we either strip this out or educate our developers to the point where they're not, that they have a solution to not add those secrets in the first place? Okay. You got this, right? You got it. Totally under your thumb. I'm going to wrap this up. I do think it's possible for you to offer a unique, personalized, secure experience for your customers. If you think of your customers and you question at every step of the way, every step of the build, every step of the delivery, at every ephemeral environment, every single stage, question, are we doing the right thing by our customers? They're giving you money, they're giving you their data, let's do the right thing there. Secondly, I do think it's possible for you to use security as a revenue driver and not just as a cost center. And ultimately, what that allows is for you to build a system, application, service, API, a pipeline that is from end to end more resilient, from end to end less prone to failure, from end to end much more available to your customers than not. And yes, I do think it's possible for you to build a screaming hot pipeline that is also security sensitive. If you question over and over and over, hey, are we doing this the right thing the right way? Are we actually looking for security issues and recirculating those things back into the pipeline? Okay. So you see, I threw up a couple of references and resources here. Throughout the presentation, I had a few reports and charts and things like that. If you want access to those, they are all listed here in the references and resources chart. And if you like to fight me on the internet, you can do that. I'll fight you back. Okay. My name is Yolonda Smith. Thank you all so much. This was a blast. Thank you, Bridget. And have a good con.